The normal people in the Star Wars galaxy had a midichlorian count of less than 2,500 per cell. But what does this mean exactly? Well, midichlorians are intelligent microscopic life forms that reside within the cells of all living organisms. According to Jedi teachings, they communicate the will of the Force to their hosts. The more midichlorians you have per cell, the stronger your connection to the Force. If your count is high enough, you can sense the Force and potentially wield it. If it's low, you might never feel anything beyond what your five senses tell you. Now, I know a lot of fans have a problem with them. The backlash started when George Lucas introduced the idea in The Phantom Menace. The main criticism is that they say midichlorians were unnecessary. They took something spiritual and mystical, the Force, and tried to explain it with science. OT fans like to say that because there was no explanation and it was so mystical, you could just let your imagination run wild and have your own interpretation of it. So George Lucas basically answered a question that no one really asked. The criticism about the midichlorians was so bad that Disney doesn't even want to talk about the word, treating it instead like the one who shall not be named and renaming it to M-Count. However, I'd like to throw my hat into the ring and say I actually like the explanation with the midichlorians. Like, how else are you supposed to go about it? The Force is depicted as something that people in the Star Wars galaxy can connect to, some to a greater and others to a lesser extent, and that is what the midichlorian levels can explain. Some people are just more gifted than others. To take a real-world example, no matter how hard I train in football, I can never even come close to achieving the greatness of Cristiano Ronaldo in football. There's always a pre-selected part, and some people just have to be more gifted, which is in turn explained by the midichlorians being stronger or weaker in certain life forms. Also, I don't see how they take away from the mysticism of the Force, as all the midichlorians really explain is that individuals with a higher count can connect to the Force in a better way, and that's it. Like, all the rest of how the Force works is still unexplored and in no way explained really. Also, Rian Johnson's shallow idea introduced in The Last Jedi that the Force flows in anyone and anyone can access it if they just train a bit, just creates a whole lot of world-building issues. Like, if anyone can tap into the Force and just use it if they just try hard enough, how come in the entire galaxy for thousands of years only a handful of Jedi and the Sith figured out how to do it? Why weren't there entire armies created of Force-wielding soldiers if you just train them properly? Hell, just train an entire stormtrooper brigade in the ways of the Force. Surely they're willing to put in the shift. So, yeah, having a midichlorian count adds a lot to the world of Star Wars and explains nicely to me why there are people who can or can't access the Force, and it also sets limits to how much they can actually access it. For example, the more powerful Force abilities, like Force Lightning or Tuda Minis, which is absorbing energy like a blaster bolts with your hands, could only be used by individuals with an incredibly high count. As I've said, not everyone can be Cristiano Ronaldo, no matter how hard we train. Of course, training can help you make up for a lack of talent or potential to a certain degree, but still, your potential is lower than the other person. Now that I've got that off my chest, feel free to argue with my points in the comments section, and let's get back to the main topic. Normal people in the Star Wars galaxy usually clocked out at a midichlorian count of 2,500 per cell or less. These individuals lack any meaningful sensitivity to the Force. They might never feel the Force at all, and wouldn't show even the most basic Force traits like precognition, danger sensing, or enhanced reflexes. These people were your everyday citizens going about their day, but that doesn't mean that these people were just NPCs. They could actually be very successful and skilled, just that they lacked the connection to the Force. Examples are Owen Lars, Luke's uncle, who was a moisture farmer and was utterly disconnected from the Force. Lando Calrissian was very charming and successful in his own way, but other than that was your regular guy. Jango and Boba Fett are also both in this category, both being renowned as the best bounty hunters in their respective times, but were carried by skill and training in combat forms unrelated to the Force. This tier is proof that you don't need the Force to survive or thrive in the galaxy, but you won't be dodging blaster bolts with your eyes closed either. The second tier were individuals with a midichlorian count of around 5,000 to 6,000 per cell, who had a mild connection to the Force, though most didn't really realize it. They might have heightened intuition, strong reflexes, or an uncanny sense of timing, which were in fact all subtle manifestations of Force sensitivity. The most well-known individual in this category will certainly be Han Solo. Even though he is known to initially reject any belief in the Force, his skills in piloting by completing the Kessel Run in under 12 parsecs without getting hit, a feat said to be impossible, can be explained by a certain intuition that he does have, which is owed to the Force. Padme Amidala could also be considered mildly Force-sensitive, as she also had her own set of hunches that might have been due to a connection to the Force. Sabine Wren is another character that is probably in this category. In the Ahsoka show, she is trained as Ahsoka's Padawan, and they keep saying how her aptitude was so low that the Jedi Order wouldn't have considered her. However, the feats she is able to do at the end of the show kinda go against my understanding of what her limits should be, and thus are world-breaking in my eyes. But Disney and Dave Filoni never really cared too much about the boundaries established by the EU. Finally, the ancient red-skinned Sith species were naturally Force-sensitive, with their average citizens probably sitting around the 5,000 range. But they lacked formal training, thus they couldn't tap into that potential without the Dark Jedi's help. At the third tier, with a Midichlorian count of around 8,000 to 9,000 per cell, we start getting into the territory of potential Jedi initiates. This was the minimum threshold for being considered for Jedi training during the days of the Galactic Republic. During the Republic era, health systems conducted routine blood screenings, and anyone with a count of 3 to 4 times above average got flagged and forwarded to the Jedi Temple. There, they'd become a Jedi initiate and go through the Jedi trials to become a Padawan. However, Jedi at this Midichlorian level often failed the Jedi trials and thus wouldn't really pass the stage to becoming a Padawan or a Knight, rather ending up in the Jedi Service Corps, showing once again that the Midichlorian count does put a limit on things. It didn't mean it was impossible. These initiates with a good mindset and hard training could still become very formidable Jedi, but they struggled a lot more with it. A well-known Jedi with a rather low Midichlorian count was Jocasta Nu, the Jedi Temple's chief librarian. She was not really a combatant, but deeply knowledgeable about the Jedi's history and lore. Most of the Inquisitors also fall into this category as they never completed their trials, and were said to be rather weak in the Force. The fifth brother and the seventh sister, for example, are shown multiple times to struggle with basic Force-based attacks, although it's hard to say if it's the lack of training or lack of potential. So, to sum it up, this tier includes people with just enough Force power to be dangerous, but not enough to rival any true Jedi or Sith Lords. At the fourth tier, we enter the realm of the true Jedi, the ones most often remembered from the Clone Wars era. With a Midichlorian count around 12,000 to 13,000 per cell, these individuals had a clear and undeniable connection to the Force, strong enough not only to pass the Jedi trials with ease, but also to become some of the better Jedi in the Order. Jedi at this level typically advanced to the rank of Knight, and with experience, many became Masters, and some even earned a seat on the Jedi High Council. During the days of the Clone Wars, these were the Jedi entrusted with leading clone legions and becoming generals on the battlefield. This tier wasn't super rare, but still, when looking at it from the wider perspective of the entire galaxy, only few actually came to this level. They certainly were a lot stronger than the average Jedi Service Corps member. A prime example of this tier is Jedi Master Plo Koon, although his use of electric judgment could mean that he might have a higher Midichlorian count than assumed. Other council members like Ki-Adi-Mundi, Kit Fisto, or Qui-Gon Jinn also capped out around this level. The Grand Inquisitor and also lesser Jedi like Quinlan Vos or Ahsoka Tano certainly were in this category as well. Perhaps the most iconic character in this list is Obi-Wan Kenobi, whose count was estimated to be around 13,000, just above the baseline. Despite being less naturally powerful than Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan's focus, mindset, and emotional control allowed him to defeat Anakin on Mustafar, who had a far greater Midichlorian count and raw power in the Force. Obi-Wan's victory proves that despite his lower potential in the Force, he could still take on a Force user with far more power. So, to sum it up, this tier contains most of the Jedi Order. Most of them weren't prodigies, nor did they need to be that, as their innate abilities and training in the Force already made them some of the greatest warriors and individuals in the galaxy. At the fifth tier, we reach a level attained by only a rare few individuals in the entire galaxy. With a Midichlorian count between 14,000 and 16,000 per cell, these Jedi were outliers even among their peers. Their connection to the Force was so strong, so instinctive that many within the Order viewed them with awe. According to Darth Tenebris, the Master of Darth Plagueis, 15,000 represented the upper limit of what most Force-sensitive beings could reach naturally. Anything beyond that, he claimed, bordered on the unnatural. Jedi within this range were often prodigies, mastering skills others spent decades trying to grasp. Count Dooku, for instance, had an estimated count around 14,000 and was considered one of the most formidable Jedi of his time before turning to the dark side. After turning, he quickly mastered abilities such as Force Lightning, showing that he was one of the greatest Force wielders in the galaxy, only being rivaled by individuals such as Mace Windu, whose count hovered near 16,000. His unique lightsaber form, Vapad, channeled elements of the dark side, a technique that would have overwhelmed anyone with less control and innate connection to the Force. This tier represents the top of the pyramid. Only the greatest Force wielders in the galaxy fell into this category, the most elite Force wielders the Jedi Order had to offer. But as high as this tier stands, it's still not the ceiling. There is one more level, a category reserved for the truly extraordinary. At the sixth and final tier, we enter the realm of legends, beings whose connection to the Force defies logic, achieving feats the other tiers could only dream of. With Midichlorian counts exceeding 20,000 per cell, these individuals are so rare that only a handful in galactic history have reached this level. However, their impact has been very great every time, shaping the fate of the galaxy itself. Anakin Skywalker, of course, stands alone at the peak of this category, with the highest Midichlorian count ever recorded of 27,000 per cell. According to prophecy, he was conceived by the Midichlorians themselves, born not of father or mother, but directly from the Force. His potential was so immense that even Master Yoda was shaken by it, and Qui-Gon Jinn, trusting his instincts over the Council's judgment, declared Anakin to be the long-awaited chosen one. Tragically, that same potential proved too volatile to control, and Anakin's fall to the dark side nearly brought about the Jedi's extinction. Yoda, whose Midichlorian count was rumored to be just around 20,000, also made him one in this rarefied category. On the other side of the spectrum was Darth Sidious, whose Midichlorian of 20,000 made him one of the greatest dark-side wielders in galactic history. Unlike the Jedi, Sidious fully embraced his raw potential, using it to bend the galaxy to his will and conceal his presence from the Jedi for decades. Darth Revan as well as Darth Vitiate were also certainly in this category, having changed the galaxy single-handedly multiple times by themselves. Finally, there's also Luke Skywalker, whose exact blood count isn't known, but in the EU, the feats of Grandmaster Luke would certainly put him in his category as well, as he became the strongest Jedi in galactic history, mastering every Force ability. What also set Luke apart was a unique outlook on the Midichlorians that broke from the traditional Jedi way. To Luke, the Force wasn't something to measure, it was something to feel, to trust, and to live by. So, there we have it. All the 6 levels of Force sensitivity. These aren't really canon, by the way, and mostly just carried together by fans and regurgitated by myself here. However, it's better than no explanation in my eyes. Please like and subscribe.